I think it was just intensely shocking to find out that all in one moment, right? That not only was I about to have the baby, but the odds of her survival were really, really low. And the odds of, if she did survive, they're like, she will likely be blind, or she won't be able to walk, or, there will be all these challenges you're about to face if she does survive this. So we just had to make a lot of really fast, hard decisions.
Hi, Kayla. Welcome to the happy hour.
Yes, hi. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to have you here. Would you introduce yourself to my listener?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Kayla Aimee. I live in the northeast-ish mountains of Georgia, and I am an author by night and a marketer by day. I've got two great kids, and yeah.
I love it. An author by night and a marketer by day. People
Yeah.
are always like, when they have, like full-time 9 to 5 regular jobs, like, I want to write a book. It's like, well, it happens at night and in the
That's right.
mornings. In
Yes,
the
yes.
mornings. Okay, you've released 2 books, but you also write in lots of other places. But tell us about the books that you've released.
Yeah, so the first book I released is called Anchored. I wrote that really for parents who are going through some medical crisis with their kids. That's what we experienced with my daughter, and a little bit of that journey. The second is called In Bloom, and that's a real angsty look at my insecurities from like adolescence on, and kind of overcoming those from a faith-based perspective. And then outside of that, I sort of just dabble a little bit here and there in the parenting writing world.
I love it so much. Well, I want to talk to you today about what you mentioned, the journey that your family went on with your daughter. And I'd love for you just to tell us that story and then walk through what that looked like with your first pregnancy.
Yeah, so my husband and I got married. We had been told I may or may not be able to have kids. Most likely not. I have endometriosis, PCOS, all the diagnoses you can stack up on top of each other for infertility. And so about 4.5 years into our marriage, we surprisingly found out we were pregnant with my daughter, and it was just so exciting. We were so thrilled. At our 20-week ultrasound, we found out she was a girl, and I called my parents. I was like playing my girl on the phone to them to let them know. And then about 4 weeks later, I was 24 weeks pregnant. I spontaneously went into labor early, and they couldn't stop my labor. So Scarlett was born at 25 weeks. She weighed 1.5 pounds, which is real tiny. And then she spent the next 6.5 months in the NICU. So it was a really intense, sort of traumatic entry into parenthood for us.
Very intense, very traumatic. I'm wondering if you could share with us, when you went into labor at 24 weeks and then, you head to the hospital and they can't stop it. What was that like for you and your husband to kind of wrap your brain around what we had? We were halfway, like, you're like, we have 16 more weeks to go. What did that look like for you guys in that part of your journey?
Yeah, that was really overwhelming in the sense that we were really unprepared that could even be an option. Like when I went to the doctor, I stopped by the doctor's office on the way home from somewhere. So I was like, I just feel off, like something just feels wrong, but I don't really know if maybe I'm overreacting, because I don't know. I've never been pregnant before. Maybe this is just part of it. And then they told me, actually, you're in active labor. And I thought, well, okay, they'll stop that though.
Yeah.
Like they'll just fix it. I was like, it was 2010. I was like, surely in 2010, there's a way to just make this, stop and I'll go about my day. So I think it was just intensely shocking to find out that all in one moment, right? That not only was I about to have the baby, but the odds of her survival were really, really low. And the odds of, if she did survive, they're like, she will likely be blind, or she won't be able to walk, or, there will be all these challenges you're about to face if she does survive this. So we just had to make a lot of really fast, hard decisions in a minute. And we had never experienced that in our marriage before. We had never, had something come at us like that So I think it was incredibly, this moment where you don't even have time to grieve in the moment, right?
Mm,
You just have to do and prepare. And it was so very painful because we didn't know what we were preparing for.
mm,
Are we about to lose her? That was the thing we thought might happen the most. One of the things that I remember really vividly from that time, because they put you on a lot of medication if this happens to you, so it gets a little blurry. Like
mm-hmm.
at one point I was hallucinating characters from The Land Before Time in my
Oh, wow.
hospital
The
room during all of
dinosaurs?
this. Yeah, there was there was a crane outside my hospital window. They were doing work on it, and I genuinely thought it was a brontosaurus, like checking on me. I thought it was.
We can laugh now, but that was not funny in the moment.
My husband was like, "What are you talking about?" Like my poor husband, because we were, in the middle of this like trauma, and I was also like, "And the dinosaur," and he's like, "I don't understand what has happened to my wife."
Yeah.
Like there was a lot going on for him. But I think like he was. I remember telling him, we need to pick a name. We didn't have a name for the baby
Mm,
yet. And I was like, I
mhm.
don't want her to be born and die and us have never named her. Like we have to pick a name. And we hadn't picked a name because we couldn't agree on a name. He didn't love my first choice. And he gave that to me in that moment, right? Like he was like, we're going to name her the name that I had, which was my grandmother's name. And I knew that that was such a gift for him, and he was trying
Mm,
to, connect and calm me, but also really scared me because I was like, if he's giving in, like it's because, right, because of how he's trying to hold my heart right now, and
mm,
that's actually even more scary.
yeah.
He's only doing that because he knows we might need it, right? He knows we might
Mm,
need a soft place here, like anywhere that he can create some softness for me. um, so yeah, it's really indescribable. I think people describe it a lot like a roller coaster. And it is very up and down, except for that, like you sign up to go on a roller coaster. Like
mhm.
you're gonna get off at some point. And from that day, like when it started, it was like we don't know when this ends.
Yeah.
We don't
Yeah.
know. We don't know how to get off this ride.
I mean, speaking of
So
roller coaster that you didn't sign up for, you said that your daughter Scarlett was in the NICU for over 6 months.
yeah,
And I think that it's something that is hard for people to understand if they haven't walked that road. Obviously, that's how life works a lot of times. But the hard to understand the reality that after you had her, you went home and you went home
yeah.
every day for 6 months, and left your daughter there. Can you talk about what that experience was like for you and your husband as well?
Yeah, that was definitely for me emotionally the most difficult thing to overcome. So when Scarlett was born, she wasn't fully formed yet. She was so early that her eyes were still fused shut. She didn't have ears. She didn't have eyebrows or um, eyelashes or anything like that. Like they still needed to form in the womb. And so to give her the best chance of survival, they put her in a tiny little plastic isolette and they keep that covered. They only open that once for 10 minutes every 4 hours. So you can't see her, and we weren't allowed to touch her. Her skin was so fragile that it would just tear on impact. Um, so I couldn't see her, and I also couldn't hold her.
Mm,
So she was over a month old before I was ever allowed to hold her for the first time. So for me, I was already feeling so isolated and so distant from my baby, and leaving her every night, knowing that I had never really touched her, knowing that I had never held her. Um, I think kind of piled on that feeling of loss.
mm,
I was very, very afraid because she was in such critical condition that I the next time they called me back to the hospital, was because it would be the end. Because they would call us sometimes in the middle of the night and be like, "You might need to come. We don't know if she's going to make it through the night." And I kept thinking, like, the first time I hold her is going to be when she's dying. Like that's when
mm.
it's going to be. And so it was incredibly just really traumatic to have to not only walk away from your brand new baby every single night and leave her and entrust her to the care of other people that you don't know,
Right.
um, but to do that, never having actually even held her,
Mhm.
um, it was really painful. And it was definitely, um, I think, something that my husband and he tried to support me as best he could in that, and not that it wasn't incredibly difficult for him too, but I think there's just that piece that you don't understand if you don't, you know, if you're not
Mhm.
necessarily the mom, um,
Mhm.
there. So it was, I think he tried his very best to support me through it, but I think it was hard for him that then he had to drive me home every night just sobbing,
Mm.
you
Mhm.
just watch,
Yeah.
like, he lost that connection with our baby, and then he had me to take care of on top of that. That's a
Yeah.
lot for one
It's a
person.
lot. It's a lot. You talk about how, he was trying to support you as best that he could. And I think I would love to hear from you, and I know our listeners would love this as well. What does support look like in that moment? I'm past the childbearing years. And so this is, I can almost guarantee, not going to be a path I'll walk down. But I definitely have, you know, lots and lots of women who are in childbearing years, and not knowing if that will be part of their story. What does it look like to support someone as they go through something that is, it feels to me like rare, but I know that it's not, if that makes sense, And
Right.
so what does it look like to support that woman and husband for sure?
Yeah, we were so incredibly blessed by the way that our community just kind of loved us so well during that time. um, One was people being really gentle with their words to us. I would feel, hurt by well-meaning comments a
Mm.
lot.
Can you
And
tell us
people
some
would
of
say
them?
things. Yeah, people would say things like, "Oh, you look so great. You don't even look like you had a baby." And I'd be like, "I wish I was still. I'm supposed to still be
Hmm.
pregnant. I should
Yeah.
look like I had a baby. I wish there was a physical reminder here.
Mm.
I didn't get far enough along."
Yeah.
um, or people would tell me often, like, "God's got this." They would say that often, and I know that was so well meaning, but it really felt painful to me in that time, because it felt like I don't understand why this is happening, and I am praying so hard for this. And people would also say often, like, "God told me she's going to make it," and that seems like it'd be so comforting. It really does. But in that moment, I kept thinking, I am begging God to tell me if
Mm.
she's going to make it. I'm begging all day, every day. And I'm her mom. Like, I need to hear it. I need to know. So what I found the most comforting, and I know it's different for different people, was when people would just say, "I'm so sorry that this has
Mhm.
happened to you. Like, I'm here for you, and I'm so sorry that this has happened." Um, that that just gave me a little more room for
Yeah.
grace while I was working out, like, how my faith was responding in the moment, so that I didn't
Mhm.
have to feel like I needed to carry that pressure of seeming okay when I wasn't. Um, and then the people who just jumped in and did stuff, like, we were, like, the medical bills from that were just completely destructive. So the
Mm.
people who fed my husband while I was at the hospital, just come over and leave coolers of food on our porch, so that, like, he was taken care of.
Yeah.
And that meant just so very much to me in that
Yeah.
moment, because I could not function. I just couldn't.
Mhm.
I tried to go to the grocery store once and just left a full cart in the middle and had to leave.
You couldn't.
So
You couldn't.
um, there was nothing happening, like, productive for me as a
Mhm.
person of society during that
Mhm.
initial stage when things were critical. Like, I couldn't contribute anything meaningful to the world.
Yeah. I have been in different scenarios than you, but also in scenarios where you're hurting and you're walking through something incredibly hard. And I think oftentimes we as humans, we want to help so badly and we want to, like, say the
Mm-hmm.
truth. Like, I love that you even said that, like, God's got this. Okay, that's true. And that's really hard to hear when you're in the middle of a hard scenario. And so I love that you said, like, just people really sitting with you in your sorrow. And I think that is uncomfortable for people sometimes. They'd rather, like, slap a little Christian sticker on it rather than have to be like, this actually really sucks. And I'm really sorry. And I don't get it. And I'm kind of mad at God too. Like that kind of feeling, I think is hard for people to deal with.
I think it was really uncomfortable for people in my tight knit circle too, because for the longest time, right? Like I from a young age, right? I was president of our FCA. I was the leader of our, like local Sunday school group. I taught our youth group. Like I was a person who like had answers about
Mhm.
faith, helped, like walked people through those pieces. And so I think it was really disconcerting for people to see me really fall apart in the middle of that. And I felt a lot of pressure to be like, I need to say that, like, I also, like, God's got this, everything's fine. And I can't say that, I can't do it right now. I am really thankful in hindsight of the way that kind of expanded my faith, to feel like what I came on the other side of that with was that I didn't lose it, right? I
Mm.
still had
Mhm.
it. I still believed in it. It was still there. Um, but I think before, right? Like our life is kind of now measured in that like before and after,
Yeah.
right? So before that, it was very limiting, right? Like this is how you're supposed to respond if you're a faithful person. And I felt shaken by my own self that wasn't my initial response, that I thought all my years of like practicing being a faithful person, like that when something hard happened, I would have it, like I'd
Mm.
walk through it with grace. I would be a lovely person in a trial of crisis. And I was not that. I was
Mm.
so broken, and I was questioning everything. And on the outside of that, I learned that's okay too, right? Like what God got is that's fine.
Mm.
He's okay with handling my questions. He's okay with just being there,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And that sort of like weakness strong piece is
Yeah.
like I was really really weak, and
Yeah.
that was okay, you
Yeah.
know. So I'm thankful for that on the other side of it. But in the moment, that definitely felt very it just felt like everything was broken. My body, like, my relationship with the Lord, my expectations for motherhood, like everything just sort of crashed in an
Mm.
instant, really. Um, and I was like, the only thing that did hold was that my faith didn't go away, right? Like
Mm.
that was still there. It just looked different. It was accessible in a different way. I
Mhm.
needed it in a different way than I had before.
It talks about like God will give you like grace for today, and he talks about I felt this a lot during COVID because there were so many unknowns with lots of stuff. And I remember one time I was like sitting on the porch and I really got into like bird watching during COVID. I mean, who didn't, right? It's
So did
like, yeah,
I.
I'm like,
Yes.
I would find myself, I think I was just kind of like sitting on the front porch, like, I don't know what I'm doing today, but I'm going to watch the birds. And I remember there was this moment when I like, it brought to my mind the scripture, like, of like how much God cares, like, he takes care of the birds and the lilies, and how much more does he take care of us? And there have been seasons in my life where I have felt that like, wow, it is only God that is sustaining me here. And I could have not imagined that previous to then. You know what I mean? Like I couldn't imagine how that would work. When you look back, you have this clearer picture now. You and your husband are in the middle of it, and you said that your faith, it did stand true, and it stood there. When you look back in that season though, in the season, like not looking back, in the season, did you feel
Yeah.
like God was for you?
In this season, I no, I didn't feel like God was against me
Uh-huh.
necessarily. It wasn't like the opposite of that feeling. It was that I couldn't feel anything.
Okay.
I felt really numb. And I felt like I can't hear from God, and this is the time, like,
Where are you?
like if you're gonna say anything, this would be a great moment to do it for me. And like, where did it go, and
Mhm.
And I think a big crux of that too is, right, I grew up in the 90s evangelical South, right? So there was
Same.
this big correlation of if you're not hearing from God, you're doing something wrong. And this made me have to really pull some of that down and evaluate, like, what do I believe because of who God is and what I believe about faith and what's true of faith, and what do I believe about things that have just been passed down, passed down, passed down, that maybe I've
Right.
never examined and aren't true.
Yeah.
And I'm not seeing them hold true in this situation. So it was a little bit more of that. And I can tell you the moment. I can pinpoint all the way down to the singular moment in time that I knew for sure, was that Scarlett had coded. And when a baby codes, they kick all the parents out of the NICU, and you're just in this crammed this little waiting room. And I was the only person there. Jeff was at work. I didn't have any of my family with me. It was just me. And at first I didn't know it was her. I walked up as the code was happening and people were kicking people out. And there's a couple things that happen then. First, you're thinking, like, please don't be my baby. Don't be my baby. And then you feel this horrible rush of guilt because you know that means that that's somebody else's baby. And there's a lot of sort of like PTSD survivor's guilt that comes from long-term exposure to something like that. And they're the people coming out, I can tell, you know, tap me, and I'm like, it's mine. It's my baby. That's coding. And you see all the nurses. I could see through the curtains in the back. They're all rushing towards her, and so just sitting in this waiting room completely alone, for almost an hour, waiting to find out if my baby was still alive, and I just remember thinking, this is it. This is the moment, and everything in my life is about to change. Like, this is. I will never be the same person after this moment. I don't know how I'm going to live after this moment. And I just remember knowing that when that happened, the only thing that I would still believe in would be my faith. That would be it. That'd be the only thing left. And it was like so thin, right? It was
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
the thinnest gossamer strand that you could hold on to. But that hadn't changed. That wasn't going to change. Like, everything was about to change and be real bad, and that wouldn't change. And I just remember thinking, that's enough. That's enough for me to hold on, right? I think I just needed to know that it would be there. And then a little bit later, they call me back in, and they've settled her down. They've done all the things they have to do, and she's breathing. She's hooked up all the machines, but she's breathing and her heart's beating. And I just thought, okay, like, now I know. Now I know. And that was, yeah, it was just really clear. It was really clear in that moment, what it was. And it didn't shift things after that. I still didn't feel like I was like hearing anything big from God. I still felt a lot of pain and a lot of grief, but I felt like I had one solid thing that I could count on, that had stayed true through all of it. And that made all the difference for me.
A lot of times we talk about grief as in, I think the most way that people would think about grief is like you're grieving someone who's gone, you're grieving a lost one. And the older I've gotten, I've grieved a lot of things that aren't humans. I've grieved a loss of a lot of things that actually didn't end in a death. And so I think grief is this massive thing that is super scary. It's super hard to walk through. It's uncomfortable. Nobody wants to stay there. It's all the things. In those, I have two questions I want to ask you right now about grief.
Yeah.
One is in the 6 months that Scarlett was in the NICU, and then one is 6 months to 12 years. Is she 12?
Yeah.
The last 11 and a half years. And so I think I would like to hear from you about grief and what that looked like for you and your husband to walk through grieving whatever it was that you were grieving in the NICU stay. And then even in these past 11 and a half years, what does that look like for you guys?
Yeah. So during the stay, it was just this ebb and flow of grief daily, almost hourly. Things would change so quickly. She'd be okay in the morning and she'd be critical again by the afternoon. So it just came in waves every day. And there was such a intense focus on the minute by minute that I was missing what was happening to us as a whole. My husband, we disagreed on certain things. We were slowly going absolutely broke. And I said slowly, but really quickly, I guess. The NICU bills were over $1 million. Like, it was crippling medical debt. And he's just like working so hard to try to, keep us going. And we were, I think, postpartum PTSD was so intense. And we weren't together. We were spending a ton of time separately. At one point, Scarlett was transferred to another hospital. So we lived apart for a good 2 months of that time. We weren't seeing each other. We weren't connecting. We were disagreeing about some of the treatment or the care. And we really, in the middle of the NICU stay, I think, grew more apart than together, because we were so intensely focused on our own grief versus how we could be grieving together and how it was impacting both of us together. So I think that's one of my larger regrets. I wish very much that we had looked for help during the time, that we had gotten support, that we had looked into what resources might be available, that we'd started counseling while she was in the NICU, so that when we try to reintegrate right after that, it's not easy. It's a really difficult re-entry into the world when you bring the baby home. So I think the grief post that was realizing how much we had lost during that time. Like we got what we wanted, right? Like our baby,
your daughter's
she came home. That was amazing. Nothing will ever compare to that feeling. But the incident itself just left a lot of collateral damage that then we needed to spend the next several years repairing. And we didn't know. We didn't know what we didn't know then.
You don't know what you don't know.
Now and I'm in a really privileged place now where people gift the book to parents who are in the NICU, right? Or my readers have been so lovely to donate it to NICU libraries around the country. Most NICUs have like a parent library where they can just borrow books. And so the most that I hear from readers is like, someone gave me this book, or my nurse gave me this book, and it helped me get help earlier in the process. And I'm so thankful that part of our story can do that for other people, because I wish it's what we had had the most.
Yeah.
To answer your second, Scarlett turns 13 in November, which is insane to me. And there would be, earlier on especially, there would be things that would just really trigger a memory for me. And I would feel either the grief or I would feel the remnants of the panic. And some of that's never really subsided. Like, I had to take my sister to the ER recently, and they hooked her up to all the machines, and just the sound of the pulse ox and everything going off
like took you back.
My body just, I was like, I can see that things are fine, but my heart rate, just the absolute immediate reaction, still exists.
My counselor always says that our brain knows that we're safe, but our body remembers what it means to be unsafe in that situation, and it reacts. Even though you can say everything's fine, this is not my daughter, she's good, all the things, your body is going, no, I remember here, and I'm going to fight for this.
Yes, it is crazy how that happens. I wasn't expecting that at all, and I could see, and now you spend that long in the NICU, right? Like, I know what all those numbers mean. I can read those. I can read those, no problem. I'm like, oh, my sister's okay. Like, this should feel good. I brought her here, but like, she's going to be fine, I think. So, and then I think the grief is over the years is is really interesting because so in Scarlett's situation, we had multiple therapists at the house all the time. She didn't learn to eat till she was 2. She didn't learn to walk. They were worried she might have paralysis, different things like that. And so we were in isolation. We still couldn't have her around people even when she was home. I've got a nurse coming to my house 4 to 5 days a week. We're working on all these things. So you're still just like really in that, and you're grieving a little bit of just like what you thought your experience would be. And also, we were still really unsure back then what kind of life she might have. Remember her being almost 2 and they were like, she's not going to be able to like walk or run normally. And like now she's 13 and she's on the soccer team. Like it's really this, this interesting place where the grief kind of turns into this path to praise, where we've been really, really blessed to see the things that we specifically hoped for her come to fruition out of like what we once grieved. So that has been a really beautiful process, but it was several years of putting our lives back together or creating new dreams or building new plans based on, where we had been. And then, halfway through that, about 5 years after we had Scarlett, because when I had Scarlett, my doctor was like, no more babies. And I was like, yeah, I'm never going to do that again. Like, I'm so happy I got this one. Yeah. And like, she's made it and she's here. And like, I don't want to go through a NICU experience like that again. And I don't want to put another baby through suffering. I was really, I didn't want to see another one of my children suffer the way that Scarlett had. And then we found out that we were like shockingly pregnant with my son. And then that was a whole new kind of experience of how grief impacts what should be joyous. Like we were so thrilled. We didn't expect that. It was a real big surprise to us. And also we were terrified.
Yeah.
So,
understandably. Yeah.
We were so scared. Yeah. And, this time, because of what had happened last time, they were able to put me on a special care plan. I was on bed rest for like the whole pregnancy. I had, nurses come out to give me special shots to try to keep me pregnant every week. I was in and out of the hospital. And this time they were able to keep me pregnant every time I tried. I tried a lot to go into labor early, but this time they were like, yeah, we got it. Yeah. But that was an interesting experience it was like the grief was so deep that it has really kind of permeated all the pieces of our lives. And we have had to work really hard as a family, as a couple, to identify those things and say, this is a reaction because of our past grief. This is where grief is intruding on what should be joyous for us. And we've got to make a different choice. Like we're going to choose to be hopeful here. We're going to choose to see joy here. I do think the contrast of the depth of that grief has created something I don't know that we would have had without it. Right. Like I think that we live very deeply presently within our family. I think we take such deep joy in everything that happens. There's lots of little things where I find that I'm like, I think I might have missed this if the grief hadn't taught me that I needed to look for it and to just take it in while it's here, right? Because we did learn that life is so fleeting, it can just go away so quickly. So, I think now we live out a lot of our parenthood knowing that like every moment that we have right now is something that we didn't expect to have. And I don't know that I would have done that before. I think I might have missed a lot more if I didn't have the grief to measure it by.
Yeah. It's funny how grief can be a measure like that. You hate it so much, and then you look up and be like, it has actually benefited me in ways I never could have imagined. And I think that's only the grace of God that could do that. You told me that you would sing a Taylor Swift song every time you would leave the hospital to Scarlett. Tell me that story and then how that came full circle for you recently.
Oh my gosh. Okay, let's see if I can get through it without crying. I have yet
Well,
to.
I
Uh,
cried when I read about it, so there's that.
Scarlett is just like, oh my goodness. She is just like the light of my life, but also she's just this like little effervescent personality. So that's so fun. But so I'm a big Taylor Swift fan, right? Like
Hmm.
from the beginning. Okay. I think I started my blog when I was in college. And like one of my like early entries is like, who's this little country singer? Like, I love this song, right? I'm like, I have followed her forever. So when I was pregnant with Scarlett, Speak Now came out, and I was a first time mom. So I would like put the headphones on my belly, like all the things they say to do. And I would play the little song. It's like, I'm so enchanted to meet you. And I was scrapbooking back then. So we have like our little scrapbook with her sonogram pictures. It's like, so enchanted to meet you. It's like real cutesy. And then when she was born, I found that I had a really hard time praying. I just was in that place where I just couldn't do it. And so I would sing to her, or we would, this is so old now, but would burn CDs of
Hmm.
like meaningful songs and hymns, and music that we would leave playing in the NICU when we couldn't be there with her. Um, and so when I would leave every night, I had taped a Bible verse to her little isolette, and I couldn't bring myself to really pray. I just couldn't get the words out. So I
Hmm.
would sing to her, and I would sing a part of that song "Enchanted" by Taylor Swift that talks about, my thoughts will echo your name until I see you again. Um, and so then, like 13 years later, I miraculously managed to score tickets to the Taylor Swift concert, right? Because you know how hard those were to get this year. I was like, I've got like 10 queues going trying to get tickets.
Uh-huh.
And I surprised Scarlett with them for Christmas because she really wanted to go. And so I'm like such a fan. I was like, I don't want to know, right? I don't want to be spoiled. I went on Instagram and I like blocked all the keywords so that I wouldn't see any concert videos or anything and be spoiled about the set list. So during the show, I'm there with my sister and my niece and my daughter. And it's like 13 years later, and Taylor Swift comes out, and the only song she sings from that album is that song. And when I tell you, Scarlett, she's dressed in all sparkles, and she's just jumping up and down, like dancing and singing. And I just like, they told me when she was born, like she might never walk. And then they did surgery on her heart, and they said, we hit her vocal cord. It might be paralyzed. She might never talk. She does talk. She just has a very high soprano because of that damage. But so she's just in her tiny soprano voice, just singing this song at the top of her lungs, dancing next to me. And I just absolutely lost it. I was just like, I remember singing this Indelible Grace song to her a lot when she was in the NICU, because again, I had a hard time praying, and it was saying, you know, hope will turn to glad fruition, faith to sight, and prayer to praise. And I was standing in the middle of 70,000 people at the Eras Tour watching her sing the song that I sang to her every night before I left her in the hospital. And I was like, this is it. Like, this is hope to glad fruition.
Mm.
Like, I never saw this coming. What a joy. Like, what a gift that I am having in this moment right now. And I don't think I'm ever going to get over it. Like, um, it was more than I ever could have dreamed. I just wanted her to live, and like
Yeah.
here she is thriving um, next to me at like my favorite singer's concert, not embarrassed to be with her mom, in
Right.
middle school. So I was like, this is probably, I'm had a wedding and given birth to two children. And I think this is like my top four like moment
Moments.
experiences of my life. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's
So
so beautiful. Well, Kayla, I'm so grateful um for you sharing your story with us today. I know that it is, although it is a miracle and it is beautiful, I know that it's often hard to go back and share things that are difficult. But as you've seen from your book, I know that it's going to be beneficial to a lot of people who are listening. So thank you so much. I'd love to hear, what are you reading these days?
yeah. So I'm reading my way through all of the Agatha Christie novels.
Got it.
Um, Yeah, I got really into old mysteries. And I don't know how, I mean, I like mysteries, but I don't know how I'd never really, like, she's like, I think the bestseller of all time, right? Agatha Christie, and I
Maybe.
just never read any. Yeah. But I discovered I really liked them because there's no modern technology in them. So you can't be like, that would have been solved if you just called someone on your cell phone.
Right.
You know how sometimes it
Yeah,
takes you out of the story when you're like, okay, but you could just like Google that.
exactly.
So I've really been enjoying like disappearing into like cozy fall mysteries.
I love it so much. Those are good. Well, I just started a new book. I was going to look it up to tell you. I just started a book by Tessa Afshar. It is our September book club. So I just started. It's her new book. It's called The Peasant King. And she was a guest on the show
Ooh,
this summer. And it's historical fiction, but it's all set around biblical things, I believe. All of her.
nice.
This will be the first book I've read of hers, so I'm excited. I'm actually starting that tomorrow, so I'm super excited.
Yeah,
Fiction
that
for the
sounds great.
win. Fiction for the
I love
win.
it.
I know. Well, Kayla, I really appreciate you so much, and thank you for taking the time to come on the happy hour and share your story with my listeners.
Yeah, thank you again for having me.
Hey friends, I hope you love this conversation as much as I did. To make sure that you never miss any of the happy hour conversations, go ahead and hit the subscribe button below to make sure you're notified every time we release a new episode. And if you want more content today, click on those videos over there. I think you're going to like them just as much as you like the one today.